um, how it is hard for this society to build space of relation, not spaces where we are going from one place to another, not a place where everything is just transitionary, there in the purpose for something else, but places where we can live. And actually, we realize that there is none of this. The places that where we can be are forests or natural spaces. And unfortunately, depending where you live or also the city where you are, it can be more or less far from where you are. So this general reflection around the difficulty of connecting, of making spaces for people to connect. I'm just saying that, like, lately I've been going to a talk. It was very interesting about anarchism and spirituality. And what was interesting is that a lot of us were coming from different background and talking about is what is spirituality today for people, and often it's like it's meeting a need, a basic need, because we don't have to be religious to want to be in spaces of connections, to want to be with other people for an other purpose than trading something, other purpose than working together or something like this. Yes, there is ways for humans to connect that are different than using each other. And when I say using each other, often we think, oh, I'm not using anybody. I don't know. I'm going out with my friends, I'm doing this and that, but we can't really know if we are really using other people if we don't work on ourselves, if we don't make sure that we don't live a life when we are using ourselves. What I mean is that when we are making sure that the relationship that we have with ourselves is not a relationship of using our life as a tool all the time to get somewhere, where we are never in a space where we can actually connect with ourselves, connect with just being. And don't get me wrong, when I'm talking about this, I have totally in mind the social and political structure in place which make it that certain part of the population have it much more harder to have a free time. We don't hear a lot of people who like their jobs. I'm not saying it's your fault. It's your fault if you go to job, like, just, like this basic bullshit self-development thing when they say that you could just like work on yourself and it will be fine. And it's not that easy. But what is more easy than what we can think is that realizing that even when we are in a situation which is not the most easier social position, as if we have as human beings, we always have the choice. We always have the choice. We always have the choice not to be fully determined by our material condition. There's always a door in our mind that can be open for a different life, a different meaning, a different way of doing things, even when we feel that there is no way out. Thinking that there is no way out is in itself a realization that we need help to get out of this mindset, because it's not the natural. I don't like to use the word natural anyway, but even if we study our mind at the neurobiological level, our mind is not fixed. When we are fixed in an ideas, when we are fixed about this is how things are, this is how reality are, this is how people are, this is how my life is, this is all the choice that I can do, and this is why I don't have any other choice. When we have this mindset, we can be sure that it is not a correspondence with the true ability of our mind at the neurobiological level, without even talking about energy or like whatever, like new age, like bullshit. Just at the neurobiological level, we can't we can't support the idea that things are fixed and this is how they are. It's not because we have fixed ideas about certain things that this is how it is. In other words, when we study how the brain is functioning, we know that the brain is in a constant relation with the outside. It's not an isolated thing. Thought and ideas don't come from just ourselves. That's really basic to say, but we always have to remind ourselves this. Thought patterns comes from a co-construction with the outside. There is interesting research by the researcher Francisco Varela. One of the most interesting literature around how the brain is functioning and the plasticity of the brain. And since then, we see that relation of the construction of thought patterns, of ideas, are, in other words, a reflection of the environment we are in. That is really, really hard to... It's easy to hear one time. It is much more hard to remember this when we are in a situation. This is what I really like about, I don't know, about philosophy in general, or just ideas, is that things can sometimes like feel simple. I like, for example, in the way philosophy was conceived before in antique time. It was not these people who were writing books and books and everything. Some like I think Marc Aurèle even just wrote like in his lifetime like a really tiny couple of pages or something. So we could think that, oh, that's fine, I just read it all, like I understand. Simple sentence that, for example, the mind is a creature of habit. What Francisco Varela just said now with the Francisco Varela is like the 1990s, I think, something like this. But he talked about the nature of the brain, like how it's working. Let's use another word than nature, but what is so about the plasticity of the brain, and it's not just that the brain is an interaction with the environment, is the brain is being formed with the environment. In other words, there is no development of function of the brain without a certain set of interaction with the outside. In other words, there is a necessity of interaction for the creation of many vital neural pathways. And we can see that back to Aristotle, there is things that has already been discussed about. What I really liked about the philosophy as well is that sometimes sentences or theses can be said, but the depth of what is being said is so deep that it needs sometimes centuries and several disciplines to study what it means at the neurobiological level, for instance. The mind is a creature of habit. Creature of habit. So, all of this to say that when we live in a society which is marketing basic needs like the need for human beings for connections, the needs for human beings to be seen, the need for human being to have a shelter, to eat. We see these basic needs are actually being traded. They're actually being traded. We trade your need to feel seen. I won't go like too in depth about the psychology of identity formation, because I'm not an expert in psychology literature either. But I know that from a philosophical standpoint, there is no building of identity without the other. When we remove the other from the equation, it's a bit similar than what we have been said with the formation of the brain and the necessity for the interaction. And all of this to say is that how, as anarchist people, as anarchist groups, or as free thinkers, we can actually realize that modern society are going into this, into trading your basic needs. As I said, trading needs that you can't go without them. You can't go very long without being recognized from your peers, having this interaction, having time with other human beings, not just working with people, not just trading with people, not just going from A to B to work or just having superficial conversations. But I don't know, I'm not going to make a list about all the needs of a human being that is supposed to be met, because they are as long as all what your body needs to be like well nourished in the society. And anyway, the question is that for the people who are interested in creating another way of living is to realize this and to not let the society make you pay for this, but realizing that there is other communities who are thinking all of this through and that are creating spaces for that. These are not perfect, but they are existing. Probably it's going to be the object of another video.